In operating theaters, in courtrooms, in cockpits, and in the offices where financial and political decisions are made every day, the people responsible for those decisions are often sleep-deprived. And a scoping review published in 2025, examining 25 studies and over 200 participants, has now mapped what sleep deprivation actually does to decision-making, not in theory, but in measurable, documented ways. The findings are not what most people expect. It is not simply that tired people make worse decisions. It is that specific types of decisions deteriorate in specific ways, and some of them in ways you would not anticipate. Before we go any further, because this is curious and verified, here are the sources. The first is a scoping review titled Examining the Effects of Sleep Deprivation on Decision-Making, published in Behavioral Sciences in June 2025, by researchers from the University of Galway, the University of Alberta, and the University of Ghana. The second is a study published in Clocks and Sleep in June 2024, examining the specific interaction between time of day, circadian rhythm, and sleep deprivation on risky decision-making. Both links are in the description. Everything in this video comes directly from these two papers. Now, let's get into it. Decision-making is not a single cognitive process. It is a family of processes. Some decisions are simple and routine. Others are complex, novel, and uncertain. Some involve risk. Some involve moral judgment. Some involve gathering information before acting. And some require suppressing an impulsive response in favor of a more considered one. The research reviewed in the 2025 Scoping Review suggests that sleep deprivation does not impair all of these equally. Some types of decision-making are more vulnerable than others, and understanding which ones turns out to have significant implications for the settings in which we allow, or expect, sleep-deprived people to make consequential decisions. The 2025 Scoping Review examined 25 peer-reviewed studies published between 2014 and 2024, representing 2,276 participants in total. The studies covered a range of decision-making types: economic decisions, ethical decisions, probabilistic decisions, and decisions made under time pressure. The overall conclusion was that sleep deprivation, whether partial or total, impairs decision-making ability across most of the types studied. But the pattern of impairment was not uniform. The review found that sleep-deprived individuals consistently showed a tendency toward riskier decisions, not random decisions, not simply slower decisions, riskier ones. Under sleep deprivation, participants in the reviewed studies were more likely to choose higher risk, higher reward options and less likely to pause to gather information before acting. A companion study, examining 5 consecutive nights of partial sleep restriction, found that this shift toward risk was more pronounced after cumulative sleep loss than after a single night of total sleep deprivation. In other words, one bad night may not significantly alter your decision-making, but 5 nights of insufficient sleep reduced the amount of information participants collected before making a decision and increased their propensity for risk. This is an important distinction. It suggests that the most dangerous form of sleep deprivation for decision-making is not the dramatic, obvious kind, the all-nighter, the 36-hour shift, but the chronic, quiet kind, the accumulated deficit of getting 6 hours instead of 7, night after night, week after week. The 2025 review also examined real-world evidence. 2 studies looked at sleep deprivation in surgeons. Others examined sports officials, referees and judges making split-second decisions under pressure. In both contexts, sleep deprivation was associated with reduced decision-making accuracy. Sleep-deprived surgeons made more errors in simulated surgical tasks. Sleep-deprived sports officials made more incorrect calls. The review noted that these findings have direct implications for high-stakes professional environments, medicine, aviation, law enforcement, and finance, where decisions made while fatigued can have consequences that extend well beyond the individual. The second study, from Clocks and Sleep, added a layer that the scoping review did not cover. It examined not just sleep deprivation, but time of day. The circadian rhythm, the body's internal biological clock, does not simply regulate when you feel sleepy. It also regulates cognitive performance. The study found that risky decision-making was affected by the interaction between sleep deprivation and circadian phase, meaning the time of day at which the decision is being made. Performance on risky decision tasks was not constant across the day. It varied, and sleep deprivation interacted with that variation, amplifying impairment at certain times of day and moderating it at others. This is significant because it suggests that the timing of consequential decisions may matter as much as the amount of sleep a person has had. Now, a critical eye. The 2025 scoping review has notable limitations that the authors acknowledge directly. The 25 studies included varied considerably in methodology. Different studies used different measures of sleep deprivation. Some used total sleep deprivation, others used partial restriction over several nights. Different studies also used different decision-making tasks, which are not directly comparable to one another. The sample sizes were often small. The majority of participants were young adults, typically university students, which limits how far the findings can be generalized to older adults or clinical populations. And most studies were conducted in controlled laboratory conditions. Whether the same patterns hold in the messy, high-pressure environments where real consequential decisions are made is a question that field research has only partially answered. The clocks and sleep study similarly used a small sample, and the authors noted that replication in larger and more diverse groups is needed before firm conclusions can be drawn. So what does this research tell us? It tells us that sleep deprivation shifts decision-making in a specific direction, toward risk, away from deliberation, and away from information gathering before acting. It tells us that cumulative sleep restriction may be more damaging to decision-making than single-night deprivation. And it tells us that the time of day at which a decision is made interacts with sleep status in ways that science is still working to map. None of this tells us precisely how much sleep is required to preserve optimal decision-making. That threshold appears to vary by individual, by the type of decision, and by other factors including stress and cognitive load. What the research does suggest is that the cost of insufficient sleep is not always visible in the moment. You may feel functional. You may believe your judgment is sound. But the data, across 25 studies and over 2,000 participants, suggests otherwise. Let's bring this back to where we started. Sleep-deprived surgeons, sleep-deprived referees, sleep-deprived professionals in every field where decisions carry real consequences. The research does not say these people are incompetent. It says their decision-making operates differently when they are sleep-deprived, with a measurable shift toward risk and away from careful deliberation. The question worth sitting with is not an individual one. It is a structural one. If we know that sleep deprivation impairs the decisions of those we trust with our health, our safety, and our institutions, why do so many of the systems built around those decisions treat sleep as optional? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Both studies are linked in the description, peer-reviewed and free to read. As always on this channel, the source comes first. Subscribe if you want more, and we will see you in the next one.